All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for attending our February virtual career series, where we feature a UCSB Comm alumni talking about their career journey and what it's like to work in lots of different fields using their comm degree. So for this, today, we're with Jennifer Cruz talking about building a career in Corp Comm. For those of you that missed the January event with Allison about event marketing, that is available on our website. And I will put the link in the chat, but that's available through our Instagram page, on the YouTube channel for the department, and also the website. Coming up in March, Desiree Flores is talking about careers in entertainment and social impact. And then April Dylan Casey is speaking about careers in marketing and product management. And then we will be announcing May probably next month. So stay tuned for all of that. And please join the many ways to stay in touch with us to find out about events. So the most important, I think, would be the LinkedIn group, because that is a private group that's only available to Comm alumni. So please check that out and ask to be admitted, and we will accept you into that. There's about 4,000 people in that, and it's a great place where we share information about jobs as well. And of course, the Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and all that. So let's move on to our speaker for today, which is so exciting. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for joining us. Jennifer is the Vice President Communication at PennyMac Financial Services in Westlake Village, California. She oversees a large-scale communications operation focusing on improving strategy and execution of executive communications, as well as internal impact and engagement. Jennifer obtained a BA in communication from UCSB, where she completed a thesis on Moderators to Teammate Hostility. She obtained her MBA from the University of Southern California with a focus on strategy and communication. And we are delighted to have Jennifer with us today to share her amazing story. So we'll now stop sharing on my end, and I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer so she can share her presentation. And for those just are joining, please feel free to ask questions at any time. You can come off video and just ask a question. You can pop a question in chat, and then I'll go ahead and ask the question. So off to you.
Thank you so much, Jeanette. For those of you who missed January's, it was a fascinating and really great talk about event marketing. Even though that's not anything that I'm in, I was riveted, and it really made me step up my presentation game for this round. So please definitely go back and check it out. But I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. If somebody can just give me a thumbs up that they're seeing the presentation properly.
Yep, looks great.
So I'm just here to talk to you a little bit about how I sort of built my own career path in corporate communication, using obviously the skills that I learned from the communication classes at UCSB in my role, but also just kind of navigating the corporate world. I know it can be very daunting. And so I just think that a comm degree sets you up perfectly for that sort of challenge. So that's kind of how I tailored it today. Here we go. So I have 4 different sections here. First, the time that I was at UCSB. So the classes that I took, as well as work that I did. I was a transfer student, so I did have some work history prior to going to UCSB. But I really just, I wanted a career change. So after I graduated, I tailored everything to comm. Then I'm going to be going into the timeline since I graduated, and just kind of how I built my career over the last few years. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I do now in corporate communication, what I've done in the past in other organizations, what some of my network also does under that broad umbrella. And then just end with a little bit of a few tips for, again, navigating that corporate world. Oh, and I have a little guest speaker here, my cat, on the bottom of the screen. Okay, so at UCSB, as I kind of alluded to, I was a non-traditional student. I was a returning student. And so I needed to work the entire time that I was on campus supporting myself. So I really tried to maximize the breadth of classes that I took. These are some of the classes, just some of the classes where I am still using some of the lessons that I learned. So in no particular order, I don't want to piss off any professor over another, especially if they're going to be watching this a little bit later. But persuasion is huge in what I do. You have to understand how people make decisions. Not everybody makes decisions based on the same factors that you do. And so if you are going to be trying to convince your audience of anything, you want to try to hit different points, or at least understand where your particular audience is coming from. So part of that is audience segmentation and audience analysis. And then something that came up, I just added to my slides, is when to use gain and loss framing. That I made a strategy recommendation 2 days ago in my job saying, hey, you know, we should really use a gain frame strategy for this particular communication. Common power. If Professor Abra watches this, this was probably one of my favorite classes at UCSB. It's just fascinating, but the way that I use it might be considered for evil. You learn how people in different power positions communicate. So some of the tips that I took away from it were the fact that people in higher power positions rarely use the word I in their communications, especially emails. They will be very direct. They won't say, I want you to, or anything like that, or I'm thinking this. It's, this is what's happening. And so in my job, if I wanted to sort of reinforce that power dynamic, you know, if I'm talking to an executive, I'll use I a little bit more than I might normally. If I want to present myself as an authority to peers or to my team, I'll drop I's. I will go through and re-edit my emails and drop the use of I's. You also drop justs. You know, it's not that I just want to check in. You're going to say, what's the status of this? So probably not how he intended it to be used, but it's really great tips for communicating in a corporate environment. Risk communication, I believe this was a special topic at the time. Hopefully it has joined the regular rotation. But in a corporate setting, one of the things you may be asked to do is help with reputational maintenance. And so risk comm really helped with that. Basically, when should you apologize if your company did something wrong, you know, and how you would approach those sorts of talking points. For statistics, I know it's probably not everybody's favorite class at UCSB, but I am thankful that it's a requirement for our degree because I still use it. I used it recently to try to gauge the best time to send particular types of emails. So I ran a regression analysis, time of day that email was sent, what was in the subject line. Gosh. Sorry, my cat's kind of distracted me here. Yeah, subject lines, if it was days to a deadline, in particular, if, you know, we wanted people to submit their timesheets on time, for example, did it matter how many days out from that deadline we sent reminders? Did it matter if we emailed managers first? And so all of that I can show my management team based on the regression analyses that I run. I know, cat. Comm and health promotion. I do not work in the healthcare arena, but this class was fascinating because our quarter project was creating an entire health campaign for a specific audience. So my campaign was on increasing exercise in the elderly population. So I learned a lot about gamification to motivate people to adopt behavior change. I also had to create my own materials, like my own, you know, marketing and creative aspects just for free because I was a student. So again, even though I'm not in the health arena, this class really helped me learn how to tailor an entire campaign for a very small audience. And then obviously there were a few classes on comm and like organizational communication, but comm and org culture is a huge one. It's actually where I prefer to focus my time if ever I can. You learn different leadership styles. You learn the ins and outs of company culture and kind of how to tweak it. You also learn that there's both top-down and bottom-up cultures at a company. A lot of times people just think it's top-down, but I recognize the importance of bottom-up culture and how to promote it as much as I can. And then, yeah, just the different aspects of organizational culture. So also while I was at UCSB, as I alluded to, I worked on campus. I was a social media intern for the comm department for a couple of quarters. I also did marketing for summer sessions. That's the photo that I'm in right there. It included tabling, which was not my favorite, but it does kind of get you out of your shell and having to talk to people and having to, I don't know, convince them to come to events. Yeah, so I strongly recommend trying to work for the department or any department on campus as much as you can. It was a maximum of 10 hours I could work a week, but I kind of got around it by working for both at the same time, and they didn't know it. But it meant I didn't have to have an off-campus job. When I did have off-campus jobs, I started out in banking. I was a bank teller for a while. And then I got promoted to personal banker, and that's when I decided I didn't want to work with the public so much and went back and changed careers. While I was in school, I was also in the customer contact center for Santa Barbara Bank and Trust. And I wrote their SOPs. I wrote, training materials, stuff that was on their intranet, just because I was a good writer and studying communication at the time. I got to standardize a lot of the customer responses, which was huge for my resume. And it was just something that I took on because I saw that responses were not consistent and poorly written. I was also an intern for a few months for a nonprofit, but that's where I got a lot of PR experience as well. So it's just as much experience as you can get doing a wide variety of things is going to help you, because I tend to use all of it in corporate communication. Then, of course, my thesis, which I still talk about. I talk about my thesis, and I talk about the research I did in grad school. My particular topic was on an organizational communication arena. It was on moderators to teammate hostility, specifically male to female directed teammate hostility. It was insane. It was a ton of work. If any of you are considering doing it next year, I loved it. I thought I hated research. I didn't want to go to grad school after it because it was so difficult. And then a couple months after graduation, I'm like, why didn't I? So yeah, you learn more statistics, you learn how to pitch your topic. I had to do a 3-minute presentation on my research and the results. And I won a prize for it. So I got my graduation regalia paid for just for, honing my public speaking skills. And then since then, so I graduated in 2016. This is a little snippet of my resume at the time, where I was really just punching up every single thing that I did on campus for my experience. I tailored my resume for every single role I could get. So as you can see, I was in callbacks for data analyst because of the statistics background, marketing coordinator, specifically for the projects that I did for HealthComm, and then corporate communications for everything else. I eventually chose a corp comm position for a financial services company, the one I'm still in, because I thought it would be a great transition, having worked in banks before, now wanting to go into corporate comms. And I wound up loving it so much I've stayed. So whatever experience that you can get, you can use to your advantage to get that job after graduation. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the industry that you want it to be in, but you can use it, and then you can go from there. But I was very, very strategic about how I communicated in the workplace. After the first few months, I realized I could do the job. I started out as a specialist too, realized I could do the job. My number one goal was to get people to want to work with me. And that meant volunteering for projects. That meant replying immediately if somebody was asking for something. It meant coming up with ideas. This, again, is where I started tailoring my language to higher ups. And coming up with solutions. A lot of times you'll find in a corporate environment, people get so stuck in their ways that if you come to them with a new idea, they're going to say, no, we can't do that. And I wanted to be the person that would say, we can make it work by doing this. And then, people want to work with you more. After that, it was getting people to trust me. So first I wanted them to like working with me. Then I wanted them to trust my judgment. But to do that, they had to work with me more and more and more, hence the first step. But at this point, everybody knew I could do the job. And they knew that I would respond really quickly and have ideas that could get their work done. This is when higher up started coming to me directly instead of going to my boss. My first boss, that is. I don't know, that may have started to irk her a little bit, but she oversaw a large department, so it was just more efficient this way. But at this point, I could start offering suggestions. It wasn't just filling the orders that they had asked, because now I knew, they were coming to me for a reason. So once you gain people's trust, then you can start to make those suggestions and really start working on your strategic skills. It was also when I got my first promotion. Then third year out, I decided to go back to grad school. This is not a requirement. I'm not saying everybody needs to do this. I almost went insane because I was in a full-time program for the fully employed. But I was able to get into an MBA program with a heavy quantitative basis by playing up that stats coursework again. I showed them my thesis. I talked about all of the strategic skills for audience analysis, the things that you learn in basically every class. I talked a lot about theory, which just got hammered into me at UCSB. And so then once I got in, people started taking me a lot more seriously at work. And they promoted me. I think within a year of my first promotion, I was promoted again to AVP. And then about a year later, I got another promotion to VP. When you are in corporate communication, you have to get used to change. When I was working at a much larger bank, there would be huge organizational changes every 6 months. At my current company, it's feast or famine. Sometimes there's, a lot of quiet time for org changes. Sometimes it all happens at once. And so this is where your reputation really pays off. You cannot just attach yourself to one executive or one mentor and hope that that will carry you through, because things can change. People leave companies, orgs restructure. Last year and then this year in tech, there's a lot of layoffs. You want to make sure that your reputation is solid throughout the organization. And then seeing that I was close to finishing my MBA at this point, I got that promotion. I think they really wanted to keep me, and I wanted to stay. And so last couple of years since graduation, I was just trying to improve my personal life at that point. So I went on, started doing trips again, but I also started doing fun projects at work because at this point, now I have an MBA. Now I can show them more data to come, to back up my suggestions. A couple of these photos are me trying to test out doing a live news program at my work. Wound up not working out. We didn't have the infrastructure to do live nightly news, but we got to test it. We got a budget for it. I got to grow my own team and keep some of that staff even after it didn't work, because they let me test out these projects. And then when my boss decided to move divisions, they didn't layer me. They didn't move me under anywhere else. I didn't get reshuffled like I had been in the past. I report directly to a chief now, because they know that I'm capable. They know that a lot of executives enjoy working with me. I have that great rapport. and they know that I can run a team on my own. So it's basically whatever I kind of want to work on, I can. If I hear of a project happening in a different division that I want in on, I can probably get in on that project. If there's something, if somebody has an idea about something that's under my scope, I'm going to lead that project. It's honestly just like, I've had so many different titles. I was in, even at this job, I was a corporate communication specialist. I was in corporate learning and internal communication. I oversaw the training team for a little bit. And now it's internal communication basically exclusively. But the last 2 promotions I've gotten were for positions that did not exist until I got those promotions. I created my own job descriptions and titles based on what I wanted to do because I could convince people that it was a good idea. So is this a guaranteed what's going to happen for you? No, of course not. There are no guarantees. But even if you don't wind up in a corp composition, but you wind up in a corporate arena, you can still use what you're learning to your advantage to get ahead in your role. So the next topic is what I actually do. So I find corporate communication fascinating. It is never a dull moment. I mean, it can be very, very stressful at times, but it's never boring. So that's nice. That's one of the reasons I like it. So currently, just starting from 12 o'clock and moving my way clockwise, I spend a little bit of time on change management. These are usually larger projects. For example, I've got 2 from our HR organization right now that I'm working on. So they don't take up as much of my day-to-day, but they are very long-term because it involves behavior change. And from the health promotions class, I know what it can take, and from persuasion as well, I know what it can take to drive that behavior change. A good chunk of my day-to-day is spent on company news. So I oversee a couple of writers who will go to various divisions, get information on any changes that are happening, or just general updates. We do our employee newsletters. We also kind of ghostwrite for some division information. We have closed circuit TVs in our offices that my team creates all of the content for. We've done video series. We did talent shows. Basically anything that we kind of feel like working on can count in that bucket. Right now, business continuity is, about 20% of what I do. 2 years ago, that would have been closer to 50. When we were in the height of COVID, I would have categorized our COVID response as part of business continuity. Thankfully, that's calmed down a little bit. But this was also my first subcommittee appointment because the security team relies on corp comm and internal comm to disseminate information to employees. And so I get to sit on that subcommittee and try to help advise strategy for when there are natural or man-made disasters. I'm named in a couple of emergency response procedures because of it, which I just find fascinating. I wanted to work for FEMA when I was at UCSB. And so I really enjoy this aspect of it. Employee engagement is too small right now for my taste. I really wish I could focus on it more, but in corporate, there's a lot of land grabs that can happen. If one particular person owns a topic, you definitely don't want to step on their toes, especially if they outrank you. So little by little, I'm making inroads into doing more for employee engagement because I think it is so closely tied to comm. This is where I still read a majority of like the research papers that I'm interested in involve employee engagement. I've made a couple of pitches over the last few years on taking it over. But again, it's, the timing hasn't worked out, but at least out there, chiefs know that this is my passion, what I want to do, what I want to work on next. So when the opportunity arises, my name comes up. And then by far right now, the biggest chunk of my time is spent on executive communication. So I delegate a lot of work to my team for like the company news, things like that. And instead I work pretty heavily in executive comms. This involves strategy and writing. So I will create a timeline of topics for executives to send out communications about. I will also make recommendations on who I think should send emails or any sort of communications on what type of topic. And then I get to take a first crack at all the drafts. So one of the things that you learn in comm that might differentiate you from, let's say, just an English majors are great at writing, but they write in their style. As a student of communication, you're learning various styles. You're learning how to tailor your messaging to audiences. And so a good chunk of what I do is paying attention to how certain executives speak. So if I have to ghostwrite for any one of them, I know what words and phrases they like to use. I know whether they speak in, longer clauses or if they're very short and to the point. A couple of times I've written emails from our CEO to go to his direct reports. Always he's the one driving what's in the messaging, but the fact that I can write for him, even in something a little bit more personal, like a message to his directs, speaks volumes about how far you can get if you know how to tailor your writing. So I've also written scripts for videos, for executive messages, annual messages that go out, talking points, just anything like that. So I love the exposure to our C-suite people. I've emailed our board members on multiple occasions. And that's just not something that anybody can do in a company. So this is kind of my day-to-day. In other companies, you might find CorpComm focuses a lot more on external. So I have done some PR work in the past, drafting press releases, just making those connections with editors at newspapers and TV stations. Crisis comms. This is what I wanted to do. It's not what I wound up doing, and I'm kind of happy for it. But there are a couple of people in my network who are the spokespeople for their company. If something were to go tragically wrong, their face is the one that's out there. They're the ones that have to talk to the press or handle any media inquiries. So that can also be in a CorpComm career if you're interested in that. Training. I mentioned this a little bit, but some companies do have training and communication lumped together. So you could be overseeing instructional designers, or you could be the person developing the material. Technical writing, if you're interested, is a wonderful skill to have. I mean, it seems like it'd be easy writing instructions like for IKEA furniture, but it's really complicated writing something so succinctly that people with with any sort of reading comprehension background can follow along. There was one time last year when I was tasked with writing a document for how to set up hidden Zoom webinars, like where people couldn't see each other and couldn't see who else was in the room. And I wound up writing a 19-page step-by-step, with screenshot document in about 4 or 5 hours. But it comes from, paying attention to training, being in that arena, and also just honing your technical writing. And then lastly, investor relations. I love the investor relation team at my company. I definitely wouldn't want to do what they do. They are under a lot more stress than I am. But some companies that I've worked for, that especially ones that are privately held, they're not on the publicly traded companies, their CorpComm people are the ones making the talking points. They might not be talking directly to investors, but they could be talking to financial backers or just the public in general. And so sometimes CorpComm is asked to take on those sorts of roles. So if you decide to go for a career in corporate communication, any one of these or any number of other things could be under your scope. So I know I'm kind of running out of time. Sorry, guys. So I'm just going to end with a few tips on navigating the corporate world, especially if it's your first corporate job. I call this tip 0. You have to actually be good at what you do. You have to pay attention in class, keep your notes as much as you can. If you don't have to sell all of your textbooks back, please keep your favorite ones. I have some on my bookshelf. Because you have to be good at what you're doing. None of the other tips will make a difference if the work that you're putting out is subpar. So with that being said, I strongly recommend taking notes. Now, this is a tricky tip, especially for women, because sometimes we get put in the note taker role. We're not there necessarily for expertise. We're there because we're taking notes. So I'm not necessarily saying that you have to volunteer to be a note taker for any meeting, but take notes for yourself. Keep those notes, refer to those notes, write down who said what, where the meetings ended, because oftentimes executives will not take notes at their own meetings. They're just going to talk and tell people what to do. You want to be the person who knows exactly what's supposed to be happening. Then next, offer to help. The way that my boss puts it is volunteer with purpose. So definitely try to get involved in projects outside of your arena. It does help with reputation management, but it also just exposes you to other people in other parts of the organization. Just make sure you know what you're getting out of it. You don't want your own projects to fall by the wayside if you're helping on somebody else's. But again, you could learn a lot, and you can just improve your reputation. You also have, I think the way that she phrased it was not relationship collateral, but basically you're developing relationships with people, hopefully also higher ups, and then you can cash in on that if you need something in the future. So as much as you can, offer to help. This leads into managing your reputation. After a while, no one's going to remember what your resume looked like. They're not going to remember where you went to school unless you talk about it a ton like I do. They might not even care so much about your title, especially if you have a bad reputation. So please, please, please pay attention to your reputation. This means paying attention to your work relationships and your work friendships. So your reputation could be tied in with someone else's. So you just have to make sure, yes, you're going to make friends at work, but try to keep those friendships outside of work unless you are comfortable having your reputation tied in with theirs. Don't be known as, the complainer as much as, it might be a struggle because people aren't going to want to work with you as much, and it just damages that reputation.
Before we move on to more tips, Jennifer, we have a question in chat where Karen asked if you could explain more about social capital.
Oh, yeah.
No, that I was just trying to suggest that maybe that was the word you were searching for.
Oh, yes, that might be, yes, capital. That's exactly it.
Okay, good.
Capital.
That's it. Sorry.
I knew it was a C. Thank you.
Then what is Lizette? Compound interest?
Compound interest. Because it sounded something that somebody else had said as well, that all value comes from compound interest.
I like how we're using all the financial terms for comms. That's great. So.
Yep, you would think I'd have those down, considering. Okay, so my next tip, after all of that, after you've offered to help people from different parts of the organization, you're learning as much as you can, you're taking those notes, you're referring to those notes, you will become irreplaceable. You're going to learn so much about your org, so much about the dynamics between, different parts of your org. And then people are going to start to join the company after you, and they won't have that information. So if you are the person who understands how things work, if you're the person who understands, why things are done a certain way. If you're the person who understands how to make a particular executive happy with his comm drafts, they can't replace you. They can't replace you easily, at least. And there's a good chance that you will have greater opportunities for advancement and negotiating raises if they know, and that they cannot replace you. Then with that social capital that you have, learn when to speak up. This also comes back to audience analysis. You definitely don't want to step over somebody because, again, in the corporate world, shakeups happen every few months. So you definitely don't want to slight anybody by going over their head with your ideas. So really pay attention to the hierarchies in your organization. Mine is very vertical. So I will make sure I'm going to my boss first to pitch an idea. If she likes it, I will ask her, does she want to take it to someone else? Or would she like me to? Who should I go to? Always deferring to, the highest ranked person in the room. But keep pitching it. I had a concept for a on-site COVID case dashboard that got knocked down a few times, even though it helped us comply with certain state regulations. But I created a proof of concept. I kept going around to people. I kept asking, hey, is there anybody else I should show this to? And eventually they let me do it. So you just have to wait for that right moment to pitch your ideas. And hopefully you will have supportive people in your organization who will take you seriously, and you get to put them into action. But if nothing else, if you remember nothing else from this talk, this is something that got me through undergrad, got me through grad school, got me through all the highs and lows of my life. When I used to run triathlons, when I was much more motivated than I am today, effort won't betray you. Just keep working hard, paying attention, putting in the effort at work, into your personal lives, any goals that you have. Just keep this in the back of your head. Effort won't betray you. So I know UCSB is known as a work hard, play hard school. Just make sure you keep working hard. That's the best tip that I can get, or that I can give rather, especially in a corporate world. It can be rough. So all that being said, now it's time for questions. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing so that I can see the chat, and if anybody wants to raise their hand.
Yeah, again, feel free to just come off mute and ask a question or pop something in chat.
I do have one question that came in. It was how my MBA complemented my comm degree, if there was overlap, if the curriculum was difficult being a comm major. So first thing, how my MBA complemented my comm degree. I chose an MBA that focused on strategy and communication because I knew I had good ideas. I knew that there was a lot more that I wanted to be able to do at my current org, but then also just in general with my career. And I wanted to be able to back it up. And so I went for the MBA that had a focus on organizational strategy because I wanted to sort of get even more into data. At the higher levels in any organization, you're going to be putting decks together about return on equity for what you're doing. And if you can prove that you're adding value or that you're saving money, you will be able to do much more projects, much more things that you're interested in. So it definitely does complement my comm degree on purpose.
Great. Hey, Karen has her hand raised, so I'll let her ask a question.
Thank you. Thanks. Gosh, interesting talk and interesting career path you've had, Jennifer. I have 3 different questions. I got to figure out which one to ask. I guess one of them that I really am kind of curious about right now would be, are you seeing many people in your company or maybe people you work with in your industry using something like Chat GPT, and are you using it, or do you see that being something that might be integrated into someone's work like yours?
We're not using it yet. We're not always the early adopters. It might be different in a tech industry, but in finance, they tend to be very old school. We just barely started using Linguix, which is like a Grammarly type, where it can suggest sentence structure. And as a comm major, I hate it. I think it simplifies things far too much and it gets the meaning wrong. But I can definitely see us moving that arena, especially for quick comms, if not the longer campaigns. I kind of play with it in my personal time. But yeah, we don't use it yet, but I can definitely see that it would be a good tool to use, especially to improve turnaround time.
Great. I'll just jump in with this comment from Tiara on the chat, who says, if you didn't have had your comm major, what would your major have been? Any classes you skipped that you wish you would have taken looking back?
I wanted to study law. I wanted to be a corporate lawyer, and then that was actually my first major. And then I started taking some business law classes. And thought that it was a little too dry. So if it wasn't comm, I might have gone back and gone for a law degree. It was actually there was an option for me to get a joint JD MBA at USC. And I almost took it, except they don't let you work when you have that sort of class load. It's a 4-year program, getting those 2 degrees. And I had just bought a house. So I opted for the MBA. But yeah, it'll probably haunt me for the rest of my life. What could have happened if I had gone into law? I do work pretty closely with our legal team, and I do stay up to date on a lot of HR laws, because that does affect what I do. So as far as classes that I skipped, I can't remember any classes that I was super excited about that I didn't take because I'm a masochist. And I probably overloaded myself a little bit. Like I did the thesis program and a capstone class at the same time. But I can tell you that I still think about my final quarter at UCSB when I was presenting my thesis and doing all these other things, and I let my grade slip in a class. And it was an organizational communication class, and I got a B, and I cried for 2 days. Especially when my diploma came in, and instead of having highest honors, which I thought I would have, I had high honors. I got a 3.86 instead of a 3.87, which was the cutoff. And I walk by my diploma every day and it haunts me. So I wouldn't say necessarily that there were any that I skipped that I wished I had taken, but I definitely wish I had put even more effort into things, which sounds awful.
I had a question, and again, if anyone else has one, come off mute or throw it in chat. Since you talked about the other functions in comms, such as PR, I was curious how you work with PR today, where they are in your organization, and kind of how that works and what that collaboration is like.
So for the longest time, my company did not have a dedicated PR person. It was in Corp Comm. They hired an SVP, a senior vice president of Corp Comm, to do the PR work at the time. He had a very heavy journalism background, and I learned a lot from him. But my company just didn't want it as its own separate function. So thankfully that's changed. And so now we have a person. She is an assistant vice president of external communications and media relations. That's her official title. So I work with her quite a bit, seeing if there's any overlap, any stories that are happening internally that we want to pitch externally, any sort of spins we can put on what's happening. that will work for press releases. So the brief background that I have in press releases means I kind of understand what it is that she needs, what she's going to be pitching, who she's going to be pitching to. So if I know of any topics that are coming up, I can send them her way. I don't necessarily have to write the press releases myself. I don't find them fun. So I'm really glad that she does.
Great. Anyone else have any questions? We have just another few minutes here. Want to make sure you all get all your questions for Jennifer while we have her.
Yeah.
I know not. I think any final comments from you, Jennifer, or anything?
Oh, Karen, I know you're about to. Okay.
Well, okay. I was just going to ask you, just for you to think back a little bit over the last few years, and maybe if you can reflect on what was the most challenging thing for you to adapt to, going from school to, full-time work and entering a job. What do you think that students can learn about, the most challenging thing that, a difference in their life, maybe experience? What's going to be the big thing for them, do you think?
For me, it was time management. I, from going to where I could adjust my class schedule or pick classes based on how I wanted to spend my free time, to having this set schedule. I mean, I put on pounds immediately that I probably didn't have to, but I just became so sedentary. But also just my time at work. There's not as much structure around, set classes. So I actually did a LinkedIn Learning class and did a certificate thing through my work on time management. And I still use some of those tips. For example, every day on my work calendar, the first hour is blocked out for what's called processing. That's me going through my inbox. Anything that I flagged from the day before, catching up on anything that came in after hours. That way I'm not staring at my inbox all day and constantly interrupting myself. I have a dedicated time to clear it out, and then I can focus on my projects. But yeah, time management was a big one.
Great. Thank you. David, I saw you raised your hand. Would you like to ask a question?
So my question is, have you ever had a message go sideways? And and what did you do? Like, what was it? And how was it received? Not the way you wanted.
Ooh, okay. Not to toot my own horn or anything. I hope that nothing that I have put out has gone sideways. I will say I was called in a few years back when the CARES Act passed. For those of you unfamiliar, obviously pretty much everybody, it was allowing forbearances for mortgages, a much easier application when people started losing their jobs and their income streams because of COVID. So we had to adapt really quickly. The first iteration of a form that we put out.
If you could mute, sorry, if you could mute so we could hear Jennifer. Thank you. Sorry, go ahead, Jennifer.
All right. So the first iteration of a form that we put out wasn't worded very well. IVRs, the recordings when people call in to contact centers, wasn't worded very well because they were just trying to do it quickly. So I got called in to try to redo all of that in like 2 days. And I mean, it just happens. Not everything can go through comms right away if they're trying to do something really quickly. But that means you have to drop everything to try to fix it. She's tired of me talking. So I think other times when things might not have landed as well is when I didn't do enough audience analysis. So for example, I send out some communications to segmented groups in the org. And I wrongfully assumed that people at a certain level would have a certain reading comprehension. And so I got a lot of replies from people at the manager level to something that was, for their information because their employees may be asking. And instead they were replying as if they had to do something. And that was pretty early on. So now I stay up to date on reading levels of the general population in the United States. Working population, it's a little scary. They consider working age to be 17 to 64, and the average reading level for working age currently, like fully comprehensive reading level, is about 5th grade. And in my company, about over half, almost 2/3 of the organization are hourly. So you have to tailor comms to them a certain way, and it can't be after hours. About half of the organization does not have college degrees. So I'm going by, the general working population reading level, 5th grade. Most corp comm professionals, and when I started out, they used a 10th grade reading level as a baseline, or actually, sorry, 9th grade. And I upped it to 10th grade because of the industry we were in. And then I had to recalibrate. Sorry, that was long.
No, that's great. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.